Ubisoft game. When you hear that term, you can immediately know what you're getting. Like a modern Marvel movie, Ubisoft has applied a systematic formula to most of their franchises. Assassin's Creed, Watch Dogs, and Far Cry all follow these formulas with an open world full of activities. Since the soft reboot of Far Cry with Far Cry 3, Ubisoft has used the same formula for each major entry afterwards, and Far Cry 6 is no different, with a large open world of Yara populated with mostly similar activities as you combat a dangerous yet charismatic figure. The game's boss, Pagan Min, or Joseph Seed, being Antón Castillo. It's a stale formula, but the performances and voice work hold the game together just like in previous Far Cry games. Newcomers will find an extraordinary lengthy adventure full of activities, but veteran fans will find just another Ubisoft game. Far Cry 6 takes place in Yara during an economic boom. After the economy collapsed during the overthrow of Anton's father, Gabriel, Anton promised to bring stability and fortune to the country with the cancer treatment drug Viviro that was a huge success, and because of this was elected as president. 7 years later, Anton now drafts his people to work in the tobacco fields to grow the plant needed to create the drug, resulted in civil war that resulted in his father's fate, not to mention drafting people into his private army. Anton is a terrific villain. He is well-spoken, organized, and well beyond saving. His son Diego is introduced at the same time as Anton, highlighting the young boy's empathy. We witness this duality right away as Diego begs Anton to spare the lives of the civilians he is traveling with, but when he tries to escape Yara, Anton does not share his son's empathy and quickly murders the people for attempting to escape his paradise. Anton and Diego rarely interact with the player, but they're shown throughout the game. We witness firsthand that Anton does love his son and wants him to grow to be an effective leader. Due to harsh torment after his father's fall and desires to pass on what he believes as strength to his son, Anton is unwilling to compromise for what he believes in and what is best for Yara. Anton is a war criminal and he's a slaver, but he understands the rules for progression were written long before his time. This entirely conveyed in a single scene between Anton and a U.S. reporter. The U.S. reporter attempts to discuss Anton's crimes and his refusal to share Viviro with the rest of the U.S., something she would benefit from given her father suffers from stage 4 cancer. I'm just going to let this scene play out because it does such an effective way of conveying how Anton acts and why he sees the world this way, because it's always based on evidence and he argues his point extremely well here.
Let's talk Viviro, a cancer treatment that extends the lives of millions around the world, except in the United States. My own father is stage 4. Why do you make Americans wait?
It's very American to expect what does not belong to you.
You refuse diplomatic overtures, even promises to lift the blockade.
I am sorry about your father, but Americans will wait, just like everyone else.
Yesterday, your network, Yara Vision, was hijacked by rebels. They called for the liberation of so-called outcasts from Viviro labor camps. Is Viviro produced with slave labor?
Truth or lies?
The truth, of course.
Yara did not write the playbook. Slavery was your first corporation, 1800 to 1860. Cotton was your #1 export. Grown by whom?
Just a second.
Slaves. 4 million Americans worth $3.5 billion. The #1 asset in your economy was people who look like me. What is that called?
A history lesson?
A head start. Replaced by a billion-dollar prison industry that pays its inmates pennies.
America is not alone.
Correct. Children sew our clothes. Sweatshops build our phones. And Viviro saves millions of lives. Do you think that those lives care where it comes from?
Santos Espinosa executed your father in the 1967 Communist Revolution. You were imprisoned at the age of 13, the same age as Diego. You were self-educated?
My mother was a wonderful teacher.
I understand you were forced to endure 15 years of hard labor. Pruning tobacco. I hear you still have the blade.
When Yara becomes paradise, when I give my Viviro to America, My methods, your questions. No one will care.
We're done here?
For your father.
This is what makes Anton such a great villain. It may seem that he's doing this for personal gain, and to an extent it is, but in reality he is a nationalist. He believes in Yara, and we learn from the narrative that after his father was overthrown, the country fell into economic and political turmoil. There was no guiding force, and Anton brought stability and profit to the country. He wants to bring Yara into the modern age, and that means dragging the country through a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood, and he's more than willing to do that by any means. Now, this is not to say that Diego is just an empty vessel to propel the story forward or serve as Anton's empathy. He values his father's input and wisdom, but at the same time understands his father's methods are barbaric. He wants to be more, but most just see him as a mirror image of his father without any knowledge about him. This dynamic is excellently conveyed in the outstanding cutscenes as you see Diego become more accustomed to violence and Anton loses himself as the guerrillas strip him of power. Diego tries to find himself as the story progresses, not only through what his father teaches him, but others as well. We see that Diego is trapped under the legacy of his family but seeks to be better, but no one will believe in him, with even the most pure people seeing that Diego's death needs to follow after Anton to ensure a free Yara.
Santos Espinosa? In the 67 Revolution?
I drove a tank right through the doors of the Capitolio in the Battle of Esperanza. I was there when we took your grandfather. I watched him die.
Why did you hate him?
The only thing a Castillo has done for Yara is rape our land. And you will do the same, Singao.
You don't know that.
I do! And if you loosen these chains, I will wrap my hands around your little throat and save Yara from another Castillo. Or you can do your country a favor and kill yourself.
We should have someone look at that mule.
It's not mine.
So, who are we? The player takes control of Dani, male or female, who is seeking to leave Yara during the height of the army draft. In doing so, his closest friends are killed, and he joins the guerrillas to fight against Anton. At first, Dani just wants to leave, but survivor's guilt holds him in Yara, and he decides to stay. There is a secret optional ending you can take as traditional with Far Cry games after Far Cry 4, but it is canon that Dani remains to fight for Yara. Dani joins Libertad, a group of like-minded individuals who want to remove Anton from power. Leading them is Clara, a charismatic leader who knows the war she fights will likely not end in her lifetime, given that the last tyrant government was overthrown and they're simply repeating the same pattern as then. Despite this, Clara loves her country and is willing to die for it. She's charismatic, kind, and she wants to put innocent lives above her own. You'll also be teamed up with a former international spy named Juan, former guerrillas who fought against Anton's father, young soldiers who suffered under Anton, and many more. Dani himself is charismatic and cares about his country. Despite wanting to leave, seeing the war against Anton as not his fight, he does care for his friends and the innocents who are suffering under Anton, even sometimes the innocents that suffer under his own actions. Willing to charge into battle for those he cares about, he's brash and willing to do whatever it means to accomplish his goals. It's definitely refreshing to play as a voice protagonist again, and Dani is a great choice, easily matching that of Jason Brody from Far Cry 3. However, unlike Jason, who slowly becomes more violent and bloodthirsty over the course of the journey, Dani understands who he is and doesn't change for the entirety of the adventure. He knows that he's a warrior and he has to kill, but he doesn't enjoy it. He only does it as necessity. So from the start to finish, Dani doesn't really change. He's still the same person from the beginning. It's more like he learns to live with himself after the death of his friends. The story itself is great and shows the duality of this revolution. Anton slowly becoming more unhinged as he loses more ground to the guerrillas, but at the same time, he also understands why he's doing all of this. Again, he's doing this for Yara, and he wants to ensure that the country can stand on its own based on the playbook provided by other countries. The guerrillas have little foresight, on the other hand, despite wanting a free Yara. The patterns of the past are repeating themselves right down to Diego and Anton's relationship, inferring that it mirrors Anton and his father. Like I stated, Anton is beyond saving and he's stuck in his ways, but Diego is young and impressionable. Despite Anton's influence starting to shift Diego's personality into a much more violent person, he never fades from becoming that empathetic figure we saw in the beginning of the game. And Anton, despite being a ruthless dictator, is doing what he believes is right for his son, showing he loves him as he loves his father and his mother when he was a child. Anton isn't heartless, but he sees the world differently, that the strong are allowed to use the weak to create a better world. Or in his words, they are lions and everyone else are lambs. Similar to how Joseph Seed never went against what he believed in, or even Voss to a degree, so does Anton. He remains true to his convictions, with Diego serving as the catalyst that combines Anton's virtues along with his empathy. So Diego could lead Yara to a future with less bloodshed, but due to many people seeing him as just an extension of what Anton has brought, not a lot of people are willing to give that chance. This is especially shown in the final moments of the game. Now, for the sake of this review, I was debating whether to talk about spoilers or not, but I feel like it's necessary here. The game has been out for about a week and spoilers are everywhere, but I will put a number right here, which will show where you can skip ahead so you don't have to watch spoilers. Okay, now this is proceed at your own risk now. During the final set of missions, we learned that Anton has leukemia. It's heavily hinted way before it now, but he confirms it, and the Reviro is not working anymore. This is why he was running those brutal experiments on his people. He was trying to find a cure, but once he reached the point of no return, his focus shifted to his legacy, which is Dani, not Diego. Diego understood this when he let Dani go, and he understands that Dani will serve as the face of Yara, becoming his general and thereby uniting the guerrillas along with Anton's regime and serve as Anton's legacy, seeing that Diego simply does not carry the violent instinct that he was hoping for. Nevertheless, he is called out by Clara for dividing their people. She calls him out because he's been trying to indoctrinate people believing that the fake Yaras need to be killed by true Yaras, which were under his regime, when in reality they are one people and he is the one dividing them. Anton is then shot by Juan, who has a sniper rifle pinned down on Anton, and in doing so triggers Anton to kill Clara and escape with Diego. During the final set of cutscenes, we see Anton knows that he's lost, but still lives in the delusion that he can still build paradise. But when seeing his city burned, he finally turns to Diego. He cares about his son, and then asks Dani to reassure him that he will not suffer similar to how he suffered when the guerrillas captured his father, but knowing that they would not honor this, kills his son, sparing him from suffering like he endured when his father was captured and commits suicide. As Anton told Clara in an earlier scene, he asked her what was their plan after they took power, and exactly that. They had no plan. There was literally no one to take control, and there was no way to hold free elections because they were still in the middle of a civil war. They decide to repeat what happened in the first guerrilla war and hand over power to the next most charismatic person, which would be Dani. Unfortunately, Dani wants no part of it, so as before, Yara is now left in ruin. They have an extremely valuable drug that everyone wants. No one has the reins to guide Yara into economic prosperity, and during the final moments, we find out that now Anton's people are now still fighting for this paradise in insurgency, while the guerrillas still fight them. So they've basically returned to where they started, but that's not where things end. Juan is heard speaking to someone who sounds like Voss in the post-game credits, the infamous and popular pirate from Far Cry 3, which we thought was dead, but we don't get a confirmation as even the subtitles just label him as speaker. If this is Voss, this means that he survived in the fight between him and Jason, but it's highly inferred that that fight was a hallucination since Voss injected him with a drug and the entire scene played out as an hallucination with TV screens and eyes everywhere. But no body was also recovered, so it's never really confirmed that Voss is killed. With Anton dead, Vivero production had increased 3 times because there was no way to regulate it. The only one regulating the export of the drug was Anton, and with him gone, the only people left are people who will basically take the highest price possible. This is why Juan throughout the entire game was hell-bent on killing Diego. It wasn't for the freedom of Yara, it was to make them weaker so no one would be there to lead. When Anton died, it would be highly inferred that Diego would take control, considering that he was nothing like Anton. He carried his strength, but he didn't have his need for violence, and it's likely he would have been given control until free elections were held. But now with him dead, there was no restrictions, and now it all comes full circle of what Juan was really doing. He was playing everyone from the beginning in order to capitalize on this new economically destroyed Yara with no solid government, allowing him to simply transport all the drugs he wants. And this is Voss, it could hint that Ubisoft is trying to pull a Remedy Entertainment or MCU and connect this Far Cry game to the rest of the Far Cry games. They may be based in the same universe, but they've never really been connected. They've always just been loose connections as magazines littered the entire Far Cry 6 landscape of images of pagan men. So there's a lot of things that Ubisoft can do here. I kind of liked the ending because it was a little more open-ended as opposed to the other Far Cry games which were more finite. And that's really a matter of personal taste. Ubisoft could also lean heavily on the idea of trying to connect all their franchises together, which has been heavily inferred. We already know that Watch Dogs and Assassin's Creed share the same universe, and so does Far Cry. But there hasn't been a universal story that connects them all. It's just been Easter eggs and side missions. So they could be deciding to try and connect something to something bigger. After all, Ubisoft is looking for ways to try and propel their franchises forward, and right now they've kind of hit a slump with all the live services that they're releasing, not to mention the poor directions with some of their bigger franchise, just like that new Ghost Recon Battle Royale game. I'm not really sure what that's all about, but nevertheless, this is where spoilers end. Far Cry 3's narrative, performances, and choreography are excellent, and it's what fans mostly play these games for. If you just want to experience the story, a narrative option is available to bypass the leveling requirements and combat challenges. The finale, again, is much more open-ended than previous Far Cry games. That won't appeal to everyone. It leaves the door open for more future adventures within the Far Cry 6 game, and it could hint that the upcoming DLC, which allows players to control Voss, Pagan Min, and Joseph Seed, may have a bigger impact than we previously thought. It may look like just a joke DLC similar to Far Cry 3 Blood Dragon, but it could have much more profound impacts on the overall narrative given the after credits scene, if you watch the spoiler section of my review. Despite the incredible story, the gameplay is where the game starts to plateau.
Clara dreamed of this moment. When I met her, I wanted to get the fuck out of Yara. Then she told me what we're fighting for. She explained it really well. Fighting with you has been great. Just great. I got your back. You have mine, you know? Even if you're old, if you're young, that's okay too. I like all of you. What I'm trying to say is, we're going to win. I promise.
Shit, you're really bad at this.
Yeah. Wow.
Dani, Clara was a great leader, but there's a reason we joined Libertad. We're with you, Jefe. Now, let's take our country back.
Now let's face it, Ubisoft games aren't exactly known for their innovative gameplay elements. Far Cry 6 plays mostly like Far Cry 5 or Far Cry 4 or even Far Cry 3 with better parkour elements that work very well. The shooting is good and the mobility system is fine. It's effective and that's the most I can say about it. They did a good job in that regard and there's nothing wrong about using simplified combat for a first-person shooter. If it works, it works. There are no core drugs this time around if you're hoping for that. Instead, the Supremo is the new drug substitute, you can call that. It does boost Danny's effective combat abilities. This includes him able to shoot rockets, go into a mad rage, go invisible, and other techniques that you can equip onto Danny. You can only pick one at a time, but they serve a great limit break on those dire situations where you need this saving grace, whether there's a helicopter or you're close to death or a tank just pops by. So it's great for those types of situations. It's on a charge that can be refilled if you get the proper mods for your weapons, so you can increase the rate of charge, but it serves mostly as just that moment where you just need that saving grace. The weapon variety is massive. The developers went above and beyond with the weapons here, and there are over 70 to choose from. There are no traditional leveling systems here. The weapons and gear serve as your level. You have rifles, submachine guns, light machine guns, sniper rifles, shotguns, bows, pistols, and rocket launchers, along with unique weapons for each tier. With the exception of the unique weapons, which have set mods and statistics, which are only found in the environment, you can customize any weapon with mods and cosmetics, with higher tier weapons labeled with stars having more mod attachments. Each weapon is a viable option, as I used the 1-star Yara SEA rifle for 90% of the game and had no problem with it. I even used it for endgame content and was easily able to one-shot enemies with no problem. So you can use whatever you want. You can purchase the standard weapons or find them in the environment in special cases, but if you do find one of the weapons that you already purchased, the game does reward you with resources instead. Danny can only swap between two primary weapons, the secondary weapon, which is usually a sidearm, and a resolver weapon, which serves as the game's power weapons, which include things like a flamethrower, a chain gun, and rocket, and other unique weapons like shooting vinyl disc at people. Because there are so many weapons, you'll need to go into the menu to swap in and out certain weapons, so you can do this at any time. There's no limitation, and this can break up the action for those seeking a seamless experience. But given the amount of weapons that are in the game, even if you play on mouse and keyboard, I can see why they went with this option. You can link a hotkey for every single weapon, you still won't have enough. So this was probably the best option given the circumstance. And all the weapons are great, well designed, and extremely viable in any situation you want. So pick your favorite and go wild. So what about the enemies? Well, they lack variety, as you might expect from a Ubisoft game. You'll fight the same enemies over and over again with small variations. This includes the cannon fodder soldier, armored engineers who deploy turrets, medics who can revive down enemies, which you can exploit by downing enemies close to medics, which will force them to come and try and revive their ally. So, you know, there's kind of an exploit there. I don't really know why they just go and revive them, but it's easier to take out medics that way. And there are also vehicles like armored cars, tanks, and helicopters. Now, this was one of the biggest letdowns for Far Cry 6, and I have to explain this. I'm not going to highlight this as spoilers because I'm certain a lot of people were going to come in this game looking forward to this, but those incredible boss fights from Far Cry 5 that were definitely the height of the entire game, they're not here. There are no boss fights, or at least if you can call these things boss fights. Most of the most profound figures are killed with just limited interaction. You just go in and they act like regular enemies and just put a bullet in their head. it's so anticlimactic considering these are supposed to be some of the most powerful figures in Anton's army and regime. These encounters make Voss's fight from Far Cry 3 seem like a masterclass in game design. In fact, I would have preferred those QuickTime events rather than whatever this is, like those one-on-one QuickTime events from Far Cry 3, rather than me just going in and putting a bullet in someone's head and then walking away. In fact, in one of the bigger fights, when you fight the doctor who's responsible for the creation of Rivero's drug, I didn't even know I killed him. I just walked into a room, shot him, and the game told me I killed him. It was just so boring. Then you come to the repetitive loop that Ubisoft games are known for. Here, players will have to take over checkpoints, destroy AA guns, locate treasure, and liberate critical areas of interest. You'll do the same thing over and over again to create fast travel points and be able to travel to these areas by air by airdropping on top of them. You'll do these things dozens of times to increase your overall rank and secure resources, which will be constantly collecting throughout the adventure. My god, you'll be collecting so much glass, gas, vehicle parts, and scrap that your head will spin. I wish the game would simply give you all the resources once you've taken a significant area, but no, you have to run around gathering all this stuff, and trust me, it is annoying as hell. Just give it to us. No need to pad this out. It definitely feels like you're just trying to extend the adventure. I can understand when it's in the environment, but when it's in an enclosed base that I just conquered, just give me the resources as a reward. They give you the specialized key. This includes the specialized keys, which are a little easier to locate, but nevertheless, you already conquered the base, just give it to us. While resources are limited and you'll need a bunch of it in order to get a lot of the items, for the most part, once you complete about, I would say, 60% of the optional activities, you'll have so much of these resources that you'll basically purchase everything. There are also optional special forces missions that yield more resources, both in multiplayer and in these text-based adventures on a timer. You choose one of 3 options for each sub-objective with a percentage on its completion. If you complete the entire operation, you're given a completion reward, and if you don't, you get nothing. It's just a text-based adventure from leaders that you recruit through side missions. It's okay if you need to get more resources or a weapon that you missed out on, but it's there in case you need it. Again, a Ubisoft game. Shove as much content as you can into as little area as possible. The game does attempt to change up these tedious tasks with environmental changes. The bases benefit from this since enemies are placed differently, and the terrain makes each encounter unique. However, if you're still killing soldiers to take the base, and it does get boring after a while once you learn how to exploit the AI, like I said with the medic, where you could just shoot someone, down them, they'll go and try and rescue them, and you just shoot them again. And for the most part, they don't really take notice unless you are very aggressive. I was able to snipe most enemies using my Yara rifle, and as long as I was quick enough, no one was the wiser. You can't disable security points, and the enemies are a bit smart enough to get into tanks if they're available, but for the most part, again, as long as you're not too aggressive, you can do this relatively easy. And the amount of AA guns you'll have to blow up, just use the Supremo or rocket launcher or dynamite, and then you'll have to go to checkpoints to destroy the same billboards over and over again. Again, it's just this repetitive loop that just constantly goes on forever. And it doesn't help that traveling by foot takes way too long, so you're kind of encouraged to do all of this. If you don't, you're just going to spend hours driving around. There is also hunting, fishing, racing, and a lot of other optional activities. Even after 30 hours, there was plenty for me to do, and the game does keep up with rewards. For example, if you do races, you can unlock new vehicle options that are only exclusive to the races, such as certain armor upgrades and weapons, but only 4 specific vehicles can carry weapons, and they did ensure that there are both cooperative and solo weapons. You can't play the entire game cooperatively. I didn't. I played it solo, but as far as I can tell from the YouTube videos I've seen, the game's difficulty doesn't change, so the game actually gets much easier if you play cooperatively. Driving is effective. The auto driving system isn't that reliable. It goes at the most slow pace possible. You can't speed it up, but it doesn't adapt to it. But driving is effective. The best optional task does come in the way of side missions. These missions allow the player to see the war from the public side, which the natives are being harassed by Anton's people or are annoyed with the guerrillas because they don't believe they have their backs. These are ordinary people and they're caught in the middle of a war that most of them don't even want to fight. So Danny will have to earn their trust, and it is really good, well choreographed missions. There are also allies you can recruit through these missions. All the allies this time around are animals, and they all have incredible designs, such as an immortal gator, a handicapped dog, a chicken that matches the Doomslayer's anger, and a returning ally from Far Cry 5, along with a deadly cat that requires a bit more grinding in order to obtain. They all sound great until you try to use them in actual combat. The terrible AI makes them such an ineffective ally. When you try to execute commands, they will sometimes ignore you. They have terrible pathing. They'll sometimes lag behind the player. And this is especially shocking considering that Far Cry 5 had superior AI. And you can also keep 2 active allies at a time. So I don't understand how they went backwards in the effectiveness of the AI here. It's just mind-boggling. It makes it to the point that your allies sometimes don't even appear when you summon them. They'll sometimes just disappear out of nowhere and then appear at other times. It's really bad AI. And yeah, it doesn't work well. Some serious patches need to be addressed for the ally AI here, and I'll get into more of that once I discuss Yara itself. It is a well-designed island. Ubisoft has always done a good job when it comes to their worlds. There are smaller islands, but the main island is the huge activity-filled location full of twists and paths. You'll have the main road that is patrolled by Anton's men, making it riskier, and the guerrilla routes that are safer but take longer to travel. Danny does have access to vehicles like I mentioned, and you can summon them from any main road. You can also store any car, helicopter, or plane as long as you provide it to a fast travel location. Just basically drive it to a fast travel location and you'll have access to it. Danny does also gain access to the wingsuit very early and can airdrop into any location provided there's no AA gun within vicinity of that airdrop. So you do have plenty of transportation options, but for the most part, you'll still have to do a lot of busy work to unlock all those fast travel points, which again just ends up with a repetitive loop that you can't really escape. The main missions do offer a decent variety, and for the most part the player is given freedom of what weapons and how they want to tackle each objective. If you break stealth, it doesn't mean the end of the world, it just means you have to kill more enemies. There's just one required stealth section, but the player is given ample creativity to do whatever they want to complete that mission. Rush in with a tank, fly in with a wingsuit and snipe everyone, or mix violence with stealth. It's up to you. You do have the power here, but just like the ally AI with the animals, any mission including an NPC escort, and thankfully there's only a handful of these, are just plain terrible. The NPCs will get stuck, stop randomly, refuse to act, have terrible combat abilities, and most importantly, their pathing. I can't explain how terrible their pathing is. In fact, here are some examples. I know these are lengthy examples, but you gotta see it is absolutely atrocious. I do not know how this got past QA, or maybe QA told them about this, and they just simply ignored it. I mean, seriously, the AI in this game makes Bethesda games look like a work of art in their AI development.
Anyone else waiting with Carlos?
I said it. You ask a lot of questions. Just him. Almost there now.
That's really the most striking thing about Far Cry 6. Every positive feature that is here is also a positive feature in every Far Cry game following Far Cry 2, technically. Strong cast of characters, great villains, and strong performances. All those things were said about every other Far Cry game, just as much as the copy-paste formula of the generic mission structure. Now, there's nothing wrong with not changing something that works. Overly changing something that already works can lead to making things worse, but it is just the same thing over again, and instead of trying to risk something on something that is new and playing it safe will result in players getting more and more agitated by being delivered the same thing over and over again. Even before playing this game, if you played any other Far Cry game, you'll instantly fall back on the same pattern of every other title. It's boring, and while capturing points that showcase the guerrilla slowly whittling down Anton's forces reflect the war effort, it could be easily drawn to Far Cry 5, where you are slowly weakening Joseph Seed's control, or in Far Cry 4, where you were weakening Pagan Min's control, or in Far Cry 3, where you were weakening Voss's control. All these things just are the same things over and over again, and eventually people are going to get tired of this, similar to how more and more people are starting to predict things within the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It's the same movie to the point that people say it's a Marvel movie. And that can also be used as a term of endearment, such as when someone says it's an Insomniac game, or if it's a Nintendo game. Those words carry a lot of weight to it. But with Ubisoft, when you say it's a Ubisoft game, it doesn't carry the same level of creativity and same level of quality. Instead, it actually comes to the cost of the game itself nowadays. Because the second you say Ubisoft game, you start to think repetitive side missions, great performances, but the same gameplay over and over again. If you are entering the franchise for the first time, this game will actually be a great starting off point. In fact, I would say start off here and then go to Far Cry 5, Far Cry 4, and Far Cry 3. Go backwards. This game offers a lot of content, and you'll definitely get your money's worth. If that's what you're seeking, you'll get over 50 hours of gameplay if you seek to 100% everything. It is a quality adventure, and again, if you never played a Far Cry game, I have no doubt in my mind this will actually blow your mind. It will probably give you the most profound adventure you've had in a long time. But if you're like me and you've experienced every major Far Cry game, this won't do anything different that you haven't experienced yet. Yes, Anton is an utterly amazing villain, and I would rank him as one of the top villains within the Far Cry universe, but even Giancarlo's outstanding performance isn't enough to carry the stale gameplay that you'll endure. So those are my views on Far Cry 6. Please leave your views in the comments below. Consider liking. If you didn't like the review, leave a dislike. It does help me better try and gauge what to improve on. Tell me what you thought about the Far Cry franchise if this is your first game, you've never played one. And I'll see you all later. I have a full walkthrough available below, and I will also be doing more reviews as time passes. I'm working on a Back 4 Blood review right now, and I will also be doing Metroid Dread in the coming weeks. So please stay tuned for that. I live stream every single day, and I hope to see you all there. And just one more shameless plug, I do have a join button. If you want to go the extra mile and support me, there are join tiers for my channel. Till next time, everyone, thanks for joining me. I know your time is valuable, and thank you for watching my video. Till next time, stay awesome, everyone.